Night I walked out of my parents' anniversary party, I wasn't carrying anger. I was carrying something quieter than that, something they'd never understand, because they'd spent 30 years teaching me that my feelings didn't take up space in this family. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it started, or rather, how it ended. Because sometimes you have to begin at the ending to make sense of everything that came before. I stood in my mother's kitchen, in the house I grew up in, holding a stack of dirty plates while my brother's wife gave a speech in the living room. A speech about family, about legacy, about what it means to love someone for 30 years. She named every person in that room, my brother Daniel, my cousin Priya, even my aunt's boyfriend who nobody had met before that evening. She did not say my name. Not once. I stood there with ceramic in my hands and I heard the applause and I thought, this is it. This is the moment I've been circling around for years without ever letting myself look directly at it. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask, where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing who's out here with me, because the people out here, they see things clearly, and I needed people who could see clearly because for a long time I couldn't. My name is Sarah. I'm 31 years old. I work as a paralegal in the same mid-sized city where I grew up, about 12 minutes from the house my parents have lived in for 3 decades. I am the younger of 2 children. My brother Daniel is 36, a sales director at a logistics company, and the undisputed favorite, not in the way families joke about it, but in the way no one ever acknowledges out loud, because acknowledging it would mean having to do something about it. His wife is Christine. They've been married for 4 years. Christine is the kind of person who rearranges other people's homes and calls it helping. She has opinions about everything and delivers them with the warmth of someone who genuinely believes she's doing you a favor. I had never liked Christine. I had tried. Genuinely tried. For the first 2 years of their marriage, I showed up to dinners and said the right things and laughed at the right moments. But Christine had decided, early and efficiently, that I was competition. Not for Daniel. She had no reason to feel insecure there. Competition for my parents' attention, for the title of the one who holds this family together. She wanted that title badly, and I hadn't even been trying to take it. The anniversary party was my mother's 70th birthday combined with my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. Daniel and Christine had announced 6 months prior that they would be handling everything. My mother had lit up in a way that made my chest hurt a little because I had been the one calling every week, the one driving her to appointments, the one who remembered which medications needed to be refilled. But Christine announced a party, and suddenly she was the devoted daughter-in-law, and I became background noise. I told myself it was fine. I told myself the party wasn't about me. I want to be honest with you. I knew going in that something would happen. Not in a dramatic premonition kind of way. In the way you know a fruit has gone bad before you cut into it. You just know. The invitation Christine sent to family members, an actual printed card, which felt like a power move, listed Daniel and Christine as hosts. It did not mention me, though I had offered to help 3 separate times and been told each time that everything was already handled. My mother called me 2 days before the party and said, in her gentle and infuriating way, "You won't cause any problems, will you? You know how Christine gets." I held the phone and looked at the wall. "How Christine gets," I said. "You know. Sensitive. I wasn't planning on causing problems, Mom." "I know, sweetheart. I just want it to be a nice evening. I want you to sit with that for a second. I want you to really feel the shape of it." My mother called me 2 days before her own anniversary party, not to ask if I needed anything, not to say she was looking forward to seeing me, but to ask me to manage my behavior around my sister-in-law's feelings. A woman who had never once in her life worried about managing her behavior around mine. I went anyway, because she was my mother, because it was 30 years of marriage, because I still, even then, believed that showing up was worth something. I arrived to find that Christine had assigned tasks. There was an actual list, printed and placed on the kitchen counter with names next to responsibilities. Daniel, welcome guests, manage the bar. Christine, host, manage the timeline, give speech. Aunt Renata, bring desserts. Cousin Priya, photography. Sarah, kitchen prep, serving, cleanup, serving, cleanup. No one called to ask if that was okay. No one left room on that list for me to sit with my own family. I was the help. I was the person who would make the evening possible and remain invisible while it happened. I picked up the list and I read it twice. Then I put it down and I started chopping vegetables. Because what else do you do? My father found me in the kitchen about 20 minutes in. He looked at the cutting board and then at me and said, "You doing okay in here?" "Sure," I said. He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something more. He didn't. He went back to the living room. That moment, the almost of it, the way he turned and walked away, that one stayed with me longer than anything Christine did that night, because Christine's cruelty was predictable. My father's silence was a choice. Guests arrived throughout the evening. I came out of the kitchen twice, and both times Christine found a reason to redirect me back. Once because the appetizer tray needed replenishing, once because she needed someone to take the coats to the guest room, and, "You don't mind, right, Sarah? You know where everything is." I know where everything is. In the house I grew up in. Yes, I smiled and I took the coats. Dinner was set up in the dining room and the living room both, with a long table for immediate family and smaller tables for the extended guests. I found my place at the family table, or I tried to. There was no seat with my name. Everyone else had small cards. My brother, my parents, Christine's parents, who I had met exactly twice, Christine's college roommate. No card for me. I stood there long enough that Priya noticed. She caught my eye from across the room with a look that said she saw it too, that she was sorry, that she didn't know what to do. I gave her the smallest shrug I could manage and found a chair at one of the side tables, next to my aunt's new boyfriend, who was perfectly nice and knew absolutely no one. I'm going to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't the sharp, hot feeling you might expect. It was something older, something that had been forming for years in the way sediment forms at the bottom of a river, slowly, quietly, until one day the current can't move it anymore. I thought, I have been erased so many times in this family that they don't even notice they're doing it. I ate dinner at the side table. I made conversation. I smiled at the right moments. And then Christine stood up to give her speech. She thanked the caterer. She had hired a small catering company for the main dishes, which was why she'd needed me for prep and serving. She thanked Daniel for being her partner in planning. She thanked every family member by name for coming, for being part of this family's story. She talked about my parents' love as something she had been privileged to witness. She talked about legacy and presence and showing up. She talked about showing up. My name was not in the speech. Not in the acknowledgments, not in the "it takes a village" part, not in the "family is everyone who loves you" part. I had been in that kitchen for 3 hours. I had driven my mother to her hair appointment that morning. I had been calling every week for 4 years. I was not in the speech. When the applause died down, I heard my mother say to Christine, "That was just beautiful, honey." I set down my fork. I picked up my purse from under the chair where I'd stowed it. I walked to the kitchen, set down the serving apron Christine had left on the counter with my name on a sticky note. My name for the apron, but not for the speech. And I walked through the back door. I didn't slam it. I want you to know that. I closed it quietly behind me because I was not performing. I was not trying to make a scene that would give Christine something to work with later. I just needed to not be in that room anymore. I sat in my car in my parents' driveway for about 4 minutes. Then I drove home. I didn't answer my phone that night. Daniel called twice. My mother called once, around 10:30. I sat on my couch with the television on, and I let them all ring. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, was that something was already unraveling. Something that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with why Christine had worked so hard to make herself indispensable to my family. Let me back up. About 3 weeks before the party, I had been at my parents' house for a regular Sunday dinner, nothing special. My mother had made pot roast, and I was helping her clear the table when she mentioned, almost in passing, that she and my father had given Daniel and Christine some money the previous year. A loan, she said, to help with the house renovation. I asked how much. My mother hesitated in the specific way she hesitates when she doesn't want to tell me something because she knows I'll have a reaction. $20,000. I kept my face neutral. I helped her clear the rest of the table, but I thought about it on the drive home, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it because my parents are not wealthy. They are comfortable. They have a retirement that works if nothing goes wrong. $20,000 was not nothing. I hadn't said anything at the time. It wasn't my money. It wasn't my business. But 2 days before the party, something arrived in my email by mistake. Daniel had been using my email address as a backup for a joint account he shared with Christine, something he'd set up years ago and never updated, and I'd forgotten about it entirely. A notification came through, a payment reminder from a private lending company. Not a bank, a private lender. I almost deleted it. I sat there with my cursor over the delete button for a long moment. Then I forwarded it to myself and saved it. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I knew that private lending companies with payment reminders do not appear in healthy financial situations, and I knew that my parents had given Daniel and Christine $20,000 the year before, and I knew that the renovation Christine had described to my mother in elaborate detail: new kitchen, refinished floors, updated bathrooms. I had been to their house 3 months ago, and it looked exactly the same. I saved the email. I said nothing. I went to the party. I chopped vegetables and carried coats and listened to a speech that didn't include my name. And then I went home. 4 days after the party, my mother called again. This time I answered. She was quiet for a moment before she spoke, which is never a good sign. My mother is not a quiet person. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay. Did you know anything about Daniel's financial situation? I chose my words carefully. I knew something wasn't adding up. I didn't have the full picture. Another silence. Your father called the bank this week about the loan we gave Daniel. He wanted to check on something. She paused. It wasn't used for the renovation. I waited. He took out additional loans, personal loans. Christine knew. It's a lot of money, Sarah. It's more than we realized. I sat with that for a moment. I want to be very clear about what I felt. I did not feel satisfaction. I know that might surprise you. I know the expected response to a story like this is some version of vindication, of I told you so. But what I actually felt was tired. Deeply. Genuinely tired. Because my parents were hurting. Because my brother had done something foolish and damaging. Because none of this fixed the fact that I had stood in a kitchen for 3 hours and been left out of a speech. I'm sorry, Mom, I said. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. We should have listened to you more, she said. You always had a sense about Christine. I thought about every dinner, every phone call, every time I had tried to say something and been asked, gently but firmly, to be more understanding, to be more flexible, to not make things difficult. It's not about being right, I told her, and I meant it. She asked if I would come to dinner that Sunday. Just the 4 of us, her, my father, Daniel, and me. Christine was not invited, which told me things had deteriorated significantly. I told her I needed to think about it. She said she understood, and she sounded like she meant it, which was something. I didn't go that Sunday. I called my father instead, and we talked for 40 minutes, which was longer than we had talked in years. He apologized for the night of the party. He said he had seen the seating situation and hadn't said anything, and he was sorry. It was a small apology, and it was real, and I accepted it without making him feel worse than he already did. Christine sent me a message 2 weeks later. It was long. It was thorough. It covered every grievance she had ever had with me, dressed up in the language of wanting to clear the air, wanting to move forward, wanting to be a real family. It did not apologize for the speech. It did not apologize for the kitchen. It apologized for the tension between us, which is a different thing entirely. Tension implies 2 people pulling in opposite directions. What had happened was not tension. It was one person consistently making herself smaller so another person could feel bigger. I read the message completely. I thought about it for a day. Then I wrote back a single paragraph. I appreciated her reaching out. I was not in a place to have this conversation right now. I wished her well. Then I put my phone down and I made myself a cup of tea and I sat by the window in my apartment and I watched the street outside and I felt not happy exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that felt like taking up the right amount of space after years of making myself fit into corners. My brother called the following week. He sounded like someone who had been awake for several nights. He apologized for Christine's behavior at the party. He apologized for the financial situation, for what it had put my parents through. He sounded genuinely ashamed, and I believe he was. He did not apologize for not noticing, for all the dinners where he had watched me be redirected and said nothing, for being in the living room while I was in the kitchen. I told him I loved him. I do love him. Love and accountability are not the same conversation. "Are we okay?" he asked. "We're working on it," I said. "Here's what I want you to understand, and I mean this with everything I have. Walking out of that party did not fix my family. It did not undo years of patterns. It did not make Christine suddenly understand what she had done or make my parents suddenly see the full picture. None of that happened overnight. What it did was something smaller and more important. It showed me, not them, me, that I was allowed to leave a room that didn't have space for me. That I didn't have to perform gratitude for being included in spaces where I was being used. That removing myself quietly was not the same as giving up. I had spent years believing that showing up was enough. That if I just kept arriving, kept helping, kept being present, eventually the space would be made. Eventually, my name would be in the speech. But here's what I learned. You cannot earn your way into being valued by people who have decided not to value you. You can only decide, at some point, clearly and without drama, that your presence is worth more than what they're offering in exchange for it. I still talk to my parents. It's different now, more honest in some ways, more careful in others. My father and I have a standing phone call on Thursday evenings. My mother and I had one hard conversation, a real one, where I told her how the years had felt, and she cried and I cried and we didn't fix everything, but we moved something that had been stuck for a long time. Daniel and Christine are working on their marriage and their finances. I'm not involved in that. I don't need to be. I have not seen Christine in person since the night of the party. I don't know when that will change or if it will. What I know is this. I have a job I'm good at. I have an apartment that is exactly the size it needs to be. I have friends who know my name and say it often. I have Thursday calls with my father and Sunday dinners with my mother when things feel stable enough for that. And I have the knowledge, quiet, unflashy, mine, that the night I walked out of that kitchen was the night I stopped auditioning for a role in my own family. I had always been there. I had just stopped letting them pretend I wasn't. If you're watching this and something in it felt familiar, if you recognize that kitchen, that list, that speech where your name should have been, I want you to hear this directly. The fact that they overlooked you does not mean you are overlookable. It means they weren't paying attention, and that is entirely their loss. Thank you for being here with me. If this reached you, share it with someone who needed it, and I'll see you next time. There's a version of this story where I leave angry, where I slam doors and send long messages and make sure everyone in that room knows exactly what they did. I used to think that version would feel better. It doesn't. What actually felt better was leaving quietly and understanding, sometime later, why any of it happened in the first place. Christine didn't erase my name from that speech because she was careless. She did it because she understood on some level that visibility is power, and she had spent years making sure the power in that family ran through her. Every redirected task, every printed list with my name next to the apron and her name next to the microphone. None of that was accidental. It was a system. And systems like that only work as long as the person being diminished keeps showing up and absorbing it without comment. The moment I walked out, I stopped being useful to the system. And that, more than anything, is what caused it to crack. I think about what it took to get there. Not the walking out. That part was almost easy once I decided. I mean the years before it. The calls I made. The appointments I drove to. The Sundays I showed up to dinners where I was tolerated rather than welcomed and told myself that love means you keep showing up regardless. I wasn't wrong about the love. I was wrong about what I owed in exchange for it. Here's what I've come to believe. Integrity is not about being the loudest person in the room when you've been wronged. It is about being honest, with yourself first, about what is actually happening and what you are willing to accept. I had not been honest with myself for a long time. I had dressed up accommodation as patience and called it a virtue. It wasn't virtue. It was fear. Fear that if I took up the space I was actually owed, someone would like me less for it. What I know now is that the people who matter, the ones worth keeping, do not shrink when you stop shrinking. They make room. My father made room when he called me on a Thursday evening and talked for 40 minutes. My mother made room when she cried during a real conversation and didn't rush to the comfortable part. Those things didn't happen because I kept absorbing everything quietly. They happened because I finally stopped. And the intelligence in that, the part I want you to hear, is that none of it required me to be cruel. I did not expose Christine publicly. I did not weaponize what I knew about the loans. The truth had its own momentum. I just stopped standing in front of it. That is what I mean when I say cause and consequence are not always loud. Sometimes they are as quiet as a back door closing behind you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who have decided not to see you is simply to leave and let them sit with the empty space where you used to make yourself small. I carried something out of that house that night. Not anger, not a plan, just the quiet, steady knowledge that I was worth more than what I had been accepting. And once you carry that, you can't really put it down again.